and not exactly a checklist, but to give you an idea of the different increments besides how much do you want, what do you want it for, and how you're going to pay it back, which is sort of the first three questions that lenders always want answers to. One thing, a word that I've been hearing used repeatedly throughout the previous people here in conjunction with this is before a lender will give you the money. Lenders don't give you money. They loan you money. They expect you to be paid. They expect you to be paid back. And it's weird, but it's like a mindset. If you start thinking they're giving me the money, it's amazing how people just, they forget there's payments involved. So I just want to, that's what so much of this is about. When you're trying to understand what the heck is it that lenders want, what do they want from me? What do they want to know? Why the heck do they need to know that? That's part of the reason why, is because they need to understand that you have to pay it back and how exactly it is that you plan to do it. So, in the beginning, you've decided to do this thing. And so you're out seeking money. You've identified, you have a pro forma budget. Pro forma, all that means is that it's a working budget. It's not carved in stone yet for your project. So you know how much it's going to cost. And that should theoretically include your land acquisition or property acquisition, however it is you're getting a hold of it. If you're lucky enough to get it donated, then obviously that's much less. Your construction costs, financing costs, the whole Megillah. Then you need to have something called a project sources and uses. And what that is it takes the budget one step further. And it says, okay, the uses are what you're going to spend the money on. The sources are where you're going to get the money from. And they need to equal each other. And so that's where you get the concept of gaps and stuff like that, is that when you get a conventional lender is willing to come in for, say it's a $10 million construction budget. That's too big for most nonprofit lenders. A few, like Darnell's organization, have gobs of money, but ours doesn't. I'm teasing him.
See me later, Darnell.
Everything. Usually you're going to have to go to a bank or somebody like that to get larger amounts. But if they will say only go up to 65% loan to value, your project appraises out at, I need to do this in different numbers so I can do them in my head. We'll just use the 10 million number, and you only go to 65%. That means they're going to be willing to put up $6.5 million. So, whoa, you've got a $3.5 million gap. Where are you going to come up with that? And so that's where you go after grant funds, things like that, from city, county, state, feds, foundations, whoever might be willing to give you money. And those are great because by the fact that you don't have to pay them back, your loan to value stays in the right kilter. And so you add up all those things, and then ultimately you end up with the sources and uses where they equal each other. That's what that's about. And then the pro forma cash flow, what that is the 15-year thing that Rick and Tracy were just talking about. And the idea is to demonstrate that your project is actually financially feasible. Over a period of 15 years, your expenses are projected to be this, your income is projected to be that, your debt service, which is calculated separately from the expenses, is this, and then you'll come up with a debt coverage ratio, which is what lenders need to be able to determine, can you pay the bill? And it demonstrates whether your project is financially feasible, and including paying the lender back as far as the payments. So that's what that's about. The cash flow sort of tracks that cash up and down, and that's why it's so important to look at things on an annual basis. If you look at it monthly over 15 years, number one, it's a lot of months. And number two, just like in your home budget, if you have the sort of mortgage, if you have a mortgage where your lender escrows on a monthly basis property taxes and insurance, it's a relatively small amount that gets built up over time, and then they pay the stuff out for you. If you're a co-op group, that's a large number, and you're going to want to reserve for that, but you're going to have months where you're reserving for it, but you aren't paying it out. So the numbers keep going up, your cash keeps going up. But ultimately, when that tax bill is due or whatever, boom, you're gonna take a big hit. In other words, so the numbers fluctuate up and down, which is why you look at it on an annual basis. Your business plan, you wanna know, what is your plan for this co-op? How are you gonna operate it? Who is your target market? Are you trying to serve low-income people? Are you trying to, you can have any kind of target market, that you want. Co-ops don't have to be low income. They don't have to be seniors. They could be artists, as somebody said. It could be, old ladies with cats, whatever, pit bull owners of the world in a co-op, It usually is people with like-minded in some way. Your feasibility study, market analysis, a lender is going to want to know what that is, because it shows that you've done your homework to say, yes, this project is feasible. Feasibility means the numbers add up. You are going to bring in, you know how much it will cost, you have determined your funding sources to be able to pay for that. You know how much your payments are going to be, what your expenses are going to be, and you've identified that you will produce enough income to be able to pay those. That's the feasibility. And then the market analysis comes down to, who is your target market? Does anybody want to buy a co-op in your region? Why are you building this? Who is it you're targeted at, et cetera? And so you do an analysis of that to determine. People talk a lot about need. There's need everywhere. I work in the affordable housing, community facilities, lending for projects that benefit low, very low, people making 30% or less of the area income. There's huge need, but need doesn't pay the bills. You have to have demand to go along with it. And so that's what a market analysis looks at. And so lenders want to see all of this. That's why they want it. And then finally, the all-important audited financial statements, if you have it. That's where, if you're in the world of nonprofit housing development, to use an example, the same is true in for-profit, but just to give nonprofit, you have organizations, some of whom are quite large. They're on a par with some of the biggest for-profit multifamily housing developers. That's what they do, is they're developers. They build apartments. Sometimes they also have a property management organization that does that. But over the years, they're in business, they have financial statements, they get audits. And lenders like to see those because it shows how well that organization is managed, whether they're fiscally solvent and all of that. In a co-op, it could be a little more dicey. If you're newly formed, you're not going to have any audits to show you. You might not have any even financials to show. And so then lenders are going to want to look at the financials of the groups involved. So likely the developer, and if like there's a group like the San Francisco Community Land Trust or Bay Area Community Land Trust, different ones that might do more than one project, then they're going to have a track record. And so that's what that's for. Next, they want to know who you are. And so to the extent, and this gets a little dicey again with the co-ops, because you may not have your board established yet. In the world in which we now live, and prudently in which we should have been living, you don't want to go out doing spec development, and that's called building it and hoping they'll come. That's a really hard way to do it. And whereas in the past, lenders might have been willing to do that, not anymore. And so that's where the who are you, your board, your credit history. If you're an existing organization, like say a land trust that then has multiple projects that they're doing, then you have that history. And then they want to know, what's your experience? Have you done this before? And that's where it's probably good to work with an experienced developer of projects who, as I think it was Tracy said, they make their money by getting the developer fee, and they might do the property management, and that's what they do. That's their thing, is working with co-ops or land trusts. But that in many ways is good, because it shows a track record with your lender. And by the way, these things are not just applicable to Mechanics Bank or Wells Fargo Bank or Bank of America. It applies to Nehemiah Community Reinvestment Fund, and I'm pretty sure to Clearinghouse CDFI and other CDFIs, because we all pretty much, I think, underwrite the same way. The difference is that CDFIs generally are willing to accept more risk than conventional lenders. And part of that is because conventional lenders are regulated. There are very specific rules as far as how much money they have to reserve, to how much money they have out in loans, and they have their minimum ratios and maximum ratios and things like that. CDFIs are unregulated. We're regulated only theoretically by our good sense and our boards and our investors. But that's where you're going to see the difference. The underwriting likely is exactly the same and often even tougher by a CDFI. But that doesn't mean we won't necessarily do the deal. It just means that we're going in with our eyes wide open as far as what risk is being taken. I just want that to be clear. A lot of times people are really surprised when a CDFI asks them all these hard questions. It's like, well, but you're a nonprofit, you're not supposed to ask us this stuff. Oh, it's even more important for us because we will like seriously less money. If we have a loss, it's like a tremendous part of our assets. So I just want to throw that out there because it is a surprise for people a lot of the time. So that's where all this history stuff comes in. It really gives your lender a picture. You may also run into the same stuff with people from whom you're seeking grants, whether it's foundations, the city, the state, county, whatever. Again, because they want to know that if they give you money for a project, that project's actually going to happen, and that it's going to serve whoever it is you say it's going to serve. So same thing with the Federal Home Loan Bank stuff. They're going to want to know a bunch of stuff. And then where do you get your money? As an organization, if you're an existing organization, like say a land trust or a nonprofit developer or a for-profit developer who develops projects all over, again, they want to know what's your source of revenue. Do you get grant money? Do you earn money? How do you earn it? Et cetera, et cetera. How long have you been doing it? Is your revenue going up? Is it going down? Is it holding about steady? A lot of trend analysis goes on in looking at the numbers. And then where you're getting grant support, or if you have a lot of government contracts, and it sounds weird to talk about this in terms of housing, but again, co-ops or land trusts can be targeted at all different sorts of groups. You might have one targeted at people with disabilities, that they have a contract from a state agency to provide housing. Now likely it wouldn't be ownership, or at least exactly what we're looking for, but I don't know. There's a million permutations, so it's possible that something like that. And so you'd be looking and saying, well, okay, we've had a contract with these people for the last 10 years. Do you think you'll have it for another 10 years? Because if that's a significant part of the money that you're going to use to pay the mortgage payment every month, it's important to the lender. And then this is just a laundry list of things that financial statements are made up of. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but they're going to want to see financial statements, as I said. Financial statements, you have a balance sheet, the all-important balance sheet that says where you are, how much you have in assets or don't have in assets. A lot of people think they can manage by their checkbook, and so they just have what's called an income and expense. In the nonprofit world, it's a statement of activities. That's like managing with your checkbook, and as long as you have money in the bank, hey, you're good. Maybe not so much. And a balance sheet is what tells you whether you actually have any assets at all. If people owe you money, if you owe people money, when you're just looking at how much money is coming in and how much is going out, you're not getting a complete picture. And I've seen time after time groups, not co-ops necessarily, but all kinds of groups say, well, we just don't do a balance sheet. No, we watch our checkbook, everything's good, we've been doing that for 20 years. Okay, great, but if you want to move to the next level, and more importantly, if you want to borrow money from us, you got to have a balance sheet. And it's astonishing sometimes the things that people find out when they actually do a balance sheet and suddenly realize that they don't actually have any assets. You know, they actually owe more than they have and stuff like that. So it's real important. And then, and again, what lenders are looking at is they're doing trend analysis. Are your assets going up? Are they staying about the same? Do you have a ton of liabilities in relation to the amount of assets that you have? Your current assets, meaning the stuff that you can cash out in 12 months or less, how does that, what sort of ratio is there between that and what your current liabilities are, which means bills you have to pay in the next 12 months? Are they like somewhere in the ballpark with each other? Ideally, they would be. And stuff like that. So that's what that's all about. How do you spend your money? And again, looking at expenses. salaries, contracts, overhead, is it increasing, decreasing? And again, this may not sound like it pertains to developing a cooperative housing project or a land trust, but it does insofar as the developer, you want the developer to be around to finish your project if you're an organization. And normally, the organization might be getting the loan to build the project, but it's contingent upon that developer and their experience. If they are not in sound financial condition or they're not fiscally well managed, the lender isn't going to be the only one that's up a creek. You are too. You're going to have a half-done project, and by the way, you'll owe the money, not the developer. So it's really critical for everybody concerned. And then this is where it really gets important for cooperatives. Is this is sort of bringing it all together, but it comes down to what and this is where the board training and all of that is so important for co-ops, especially when it's people that are new to doing it and you have a professional management organization, which might be a really good idea the first time out. What lenders in general are going to look at is, do you have positive cash flow? And as I have parenthetically, it's an important indicator of health. Like, A, you can pay your bills. It's sort of like at home. If you don't have positive cash flow, you're probably not buying groceries this week. That's not a good indicator of health. Do you have positive net income? And that's what we're talking, somebody was asking about, you've got a 1.15 debt coverage ratio. Well, what happens to the 0.15? Do the residents get it back? Does the bank take it? What is it? What all that really means, and to me the simplest way to put that is that for every dollar of expenses you have $1.15 to pay them. And so that means after everything's paid, including your mortgage, you have 15 cents left over. You save that, you plant petunias, whatever. Ideally, you're going to save some of that against future losses. And so that's, you want to have positive net income, but sometimes you might not. If you've been saving it and you have reserves, then you're good. And then next is an unrestricted reserve fund to cover the unexpected. You have a 5-year-old roof. Jesus, guaranteed for 30, right? Big storm. You can find yourself with a big repair bill. If you don't have a reserve, you're in trouble. And diversified funding sources, and that's again going to, if you have a professional management organization, going to want to see that they're going to be around for a while and looking at their sources of income. And then the all-important, timely, and accurate financial statements. Whether you have a history of producing financial statements or not, trust me, once you get one of these big old hanging loans, you'll be producing financial statements. We require them on a quarterly basis. And I don't know what conventional lenders want. I think in the CDFI world, it's usually pretty much quarterly, maybe every 6 months. But it's really important that we get them, because we actually look at them, because it sort of sends us out little early warning signals if an organization is starting to experience some problems. Then we can sort of step in and maybe help them figure out a way to solve some of those problems. But it's really important, and it's as important, even more so, for the organization to look at those financials so that you've got a problem. And so that's the next thing, which is that you need the organization, the board. One of the responsibilities will be that they review and approve the monthly financial statements. It's just, I can't emphasize how important it is. It's one of the primary responsibilities, if not the primary responsibility of the board of directors as a governance body for a co-op or a nonprofit or a for-profit, if it's a corporation, is to watch the money and see where it's going, and do you have enough to pay your bills, and how's it being spent, and stuff like that. It's critically important whether you're a little co-op or a big company. And that the board have an active and qualified finance committee. That means making sure that you've got people who can read a financial statement and know what it means, and who know the questions. And that's where you see a lot of nonprofit organizations that have accountants on their board, and they do that for just that reason, so that people who know what it is they're looking for. It's really important. And that there's an annual budget process that reflects input from the stakeholders. Again, this is true of any sort of organization. From a co-op, I would say it's probably critically important, because you're dealing with individuals, with families, not necessarily business people. And so it's that they need to understand, I mean, because this is their project, they own a piece of it. They need to understand what the budget is, what it's made up of, why it costs this much, et cetera, et cetera. And so, and to be able to provide input on that. The internal controls is just that, like the person who opens the mail isn't also the person who's doing the reconciliation at the end of the day saying, oh, no, we didn't get any checks today. No, you don't want, that's just sort of basic stuff. And then ongoing cash management. So when you have that 15 cents left over on every dollar, that you're putting it in something where you're getting some interest on it, or doing something with it. Where am I? This is the last slide. And then finally, and actually this isn't finally, it's like right up front, which is your project feasible? All lenders are going to want to know this, but you know, even if lenders didn't, you should want to know it, because why would you want to put a bunch of your money, and you are, whether you're borrowing it or your daddy war bucks and you can write a check, but you're going to expect to be paid back by the members of the cooperative. Before you put that money out, you need to stop and think, is this a realistic project? It's again, you don't, if we build it, they will come. No, you need to sit down and do the homework and determine if there's a need for it. Okay, and remember I said earlier, there's need, there's demand, two different things. Just because there's need doesn't mean that somebody's out there saying, I want it. Where is it? I want to write a check for it. It's really important to determine that they're both. And then you need to have community support. Trust me, if your project is the least bit controversial, and you know, you may be aware, you may not be aware, if you're doing stuff for low-income people, it's astonishing still to me after too many years to even tell you in this business how people freak out at the idea of having poor people in their neighborhood. And will protest and throw fits. Well, that can really impact you as a property owner, or hopefully property owner, if the community surrounding the project hates you. That's something you want to know right up front. And you know what? Your lender's going to care too, because that's going to affect your ability to get financing. So again, these all go into the idea of, is the project feasible? Then the old, again, they all intertwine. Can you afford it? That debt coverage ratio thing. You know, you can have a debt coverage ratio of 1.15 and have it be satisfactory, but it's sort of, think in terms of doing a budget for your family and saying, we're going to cut out all Starbucks or whatever your guilty vice is. You know, everybody has one, ice cream, whatever. And, you know, it's really tight, so we're not going to eat ice cream anymore. What do you think the likelihood of that actually happening is? You know, so you've got to figure out if you can afford it, and it has to be realistic. And your lender is looking for this too. And then finally, can your target market afford it? If, you know, you are designing the Taj Mahal of co-ops, if nobody in your market can afford to pay Taj Mahal prices, your project isn't going to happen. Or if it is, it's going to sit there vacant and be like the Taj Mahal, which is vacant, but there's nobody having to pay the rent on it. So that's it. Questions?
Yeah, you said debt service is calculated differently than expenses. What does that mean?
Where did I say that? Oh, okay, you wrote it down.
Somewhere back
Okay,
there.
debt service it's calculated after the expenses. See, when we calculate it, you've got your income, you've got your expenses. But one of the things that's not included in that expenses, for purposes of a debt service calculation, is you don't include your mortgage payments. So you have a net operating income, which is income less expenses, and then you've got that net number, and then you put your mortgage into it, because it's to see, after you've paid everything, with the money you have left over, do you have enough money to pay me? Or whoever your lender is.
15%.
Plus whatever the thing is. It'll
Okay.
kick out a ratio. That ratio, our current ratio is 1.05, which is very, very low. We like it to be
Yeah.
higher. 125 to 135 these days for conventional lenders is what I'm hearing.
Okay.
For a lot of CDFIs, it's more in the 110 to 120 range, depending on the project.
And what's a CFI?
CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution. a lot of us are nonprofits, some of us are for-profits, but the thing that we all have in common is that we make loans to groups, for-profit, nonprofit, that are serving a particular mission, usually involving serving low-income people, underserved people in some way. It could be people with disabilities, traditionally underserved populations, whatever. The difference, as I said, is that we're unregulated, and they're creeping on me with a hook.
Where do I find them, say in Washington State? I Google CDFI and I'll find it?
Well, you can do that, but an easy way would be to go on the Opportunity Finance Network website. That's a trade association for CDFIs,
Okay.
and it's called opportunityfinance.net is the thing. And they have a list of members. Now, not every CDFI is a member, but you're gonna see a good representative group. And you can search by location, you can search by what they kind of lending they do, etc.
Thank you.